ASL 1 Deaf Awareness Quiz answers. Okay, what is American Sign Language? ASL is a language capable of expressing abstract ideas. So an abstract idea is something that is not tangible, so we can talk about love, astrology, we can also talk about politics and math. I had a geometry class with a deaf teacher. You can talk about anything. We can have science, whatever you want, okay? And you will come to find that ASL uses a lot of space in front of you and movement. So we use the space in front of us to convey distance. We can talk about different people by placing them in certain areas. We can describe layouts of rooms. We can, what else? Time. Anything in the future would be placed in front of us. Anything in the back, signs go in the back. Okay, it is not a visual form of English. There is no, it's not word for word English. Okay, yes, some of the signs are iconic in that the sign does look like what it's supposed to represent, like tree. But how is this woman, right? So most of the signs are not iconic. Okay. Historically, ASL is related to French Sign Language. So a deaf French man came over, started the first school for the deaf. ASL is used by most people in which of the following countries? So there are two, Canada and the United States. Okay, Mexico has their own sign language. Brazil, own sign language. England, Great Britain, all those different countries have their own sign language. Okay. Approximately what percent of deaf people who marry are married to other deaf people? Okay, 90%. And that's because communication is easy. Communication is the most important part of a relationship. So if there's no communication barrier between two deaf people, then great. Now, some deaf people might marry someone who is an interpreter, who is an ASL teacher, who's a CODA, a child of a deaf adult, somebody who knows sign language where communication wouldn't be a problem. Okay? Then there is that 10% of deaf people who maybe they don't use sign language. Maybe they have a cochlear implant, who only speak. That would be that 10% that wouldn't marry a deaf person or wouldn't marry someone who knows sign language. Approximately what percent of deaf children are born to deaf parents? Only 10%. Okay. So most deaf children have hearing parents. It could be a genetic mutation. It could be like a non-dominant gene. It could be that they got sick when they were little, like scarlet fever, and a high fever can damage your hearing. It could be part of your ear is misshapen, but the majority of them are born to hearing parents. Okay, now the majority of those hearing parents do not learn sign language. Okay, they think English is better. If their kid learns ASL, they're not going to learn English, so there is no sign language. Okay, now if a deaf kid has deaf parents or family members, ASL is handed down that way. If a deaf child has hearing parents, okay, how do they get ASL? If they get it at all, they have to go to school. Okay, residential schools are schools where it's kind of like a college setup where they stay overnight in dorm rooms. That's where they're going to get ASL, deaf culture, deaf history, be exposed to the deaf community. The role of facial expressions, head movement, and eye gaze in ASL is grammatical. So yes, there is a certain way you have to string together your sentences, but asking different types of questions depend on if you put your eyebrows up or down. Identifying the topic of your sentence depends if you put your eyebrows up or not. Okay. Yes, in storytelling, you use your facial expressions to tell your emotions, but the majority of your facial expressions is grammatical. Then there's also including head movement, if you tilt your head to the side or not, if you nod, and then where you look. While watching another person sign, it is appropriate to focus on the signer's face. Okay, if you're not looking at their face, you might miss if they're asking you a question or not, because there's no way to sign that you're asking a question. It's with your face. Okay, a quick story. There was a college professor for my diff history class, and he didn't use facial expressions. And so it was his lectures were very like monotone because there was no emotion in his face. So we never knew if he was asking us a question or not. And then he would end up getting mad because no one raised their hand to answer, but we were like, we didn't know you asked a question. So that was fun. Okay. Among ASL signers, fingerspelling is mainly used in what ways? Fingerspelling is specifically for proper nouns. Okay, so brand names, people, places, things, any type of proper noun. Briefly talked about this earlier. ASL makes use of the space in front of a signer's body to convey distance. If something's close by, you sign it close to your body. If something's far away, you extend your arms fully out. Comparing and contrasting two or more things, you set them up on either side. And to express time concepts, okay? Any present signs you sign here, any future signs, they go forward. Okay? Indicate sentence types that's on your face. Okay? When you are signing, you have a signer's box. So it's basically from your chest, maybe like below your ribcage, right above your belly button to above your head, and here. Okay? This is also where you want to have, when you record yourself, how far your camera is to be out so that nothing gets cut off when you are signing. So if I'm signing something up here, my hands don't get cut off. Okay? That's how big you should be signing as well, not super little where it's hard to see. To get the attention of a deaf person who is looking the other way, you should, if you're in close proximity, just tap them on the shoulder. Okay? Deaf people do not mind being tapped on the shoulder as long as you're doing it nicely. Okay? Don't yell, they can't hear you. Don't wave in their face or just go and like stand right up next to them. Personal bubble. Yeah? If a path is blocked by two signers conversing with each other, you should, okay, walk through as quickly as possible. Okay? The whole goal is you don't want to interrupt their conversation. Okay? So if you're just going to stand there, like if I'm talking to you and there's somebody here and they just stand there, one, maybe we don't see them, right? Maybe we have terrible peripheral vision. But two, we don't want to stop talking, okay? And then if you bend down and kind of like go through, again, we are going to stop talking and look at you like you're a weirdo. Just walk through quickly. You can put your head down and go, excuse me. You can, or you can just walk through, okay? If there is another path that is easy and it's like right there, fine. Okay, but if you're talking about going out of your way and then doing a long around way, don't do it. Just walk through. It's fine. Okay, which of the following are considered rude by deaf people? Okay, one, watching a signed conversation, especially if you do not tell them that you know ASL, it's eavesdropping. And two, verbally talking out loud in the presence of deaf people. Because deaf people are discriminated against and have faced oppression, talking in the presence of them is another form of discrimination where you are leaving them out and preventing them to have equal access to information. We need to make sure that there's equality for everybody. And the way that we make equality for everybody between hearing and deaf people is the use of sign language. In general, the least effective communication strategy between deaf and hearing people is speech and lip reading, talking and lip reading. I think there's a lip reading question in here next. Writing back and forth or texting is fine. Obviously, the best communication is using sign language, or an interpreter will work as well. So I think I added this. What % of English is lip readable? 30% of English is lip readable. So if I were to say a few words, I'm going to turn off my voice, and I say, okay, I said ball, mall, call, and tall. Okay, all those words look the same. Okay, only 30% of English, you can't understand it. And that's if you know the context of the conversation. Okay, then there's no such thing as like an expert lip reader. Okay, if someone is good at lip reading, if they understand the context of the conversation, they may be able to get half of that conversation. The rest of it is just guessing based off of your context. Okay, so if you don't know the context of the conversation, or if someone's randomly starting a new story, you're not going to be able to understand it. 30%. That's it. Okay. Which of the following are valued in the deaf community? So, one, because the deaf community is a discriminated and an oppressed group, they really want to be able to govern their own lives. For so long, hearing people have done everything for them because they think deaf people are incapable, and that is not true. Because of the lack of respect for ASL and thinking that English is better and banning sign language, deaf people miss out on a lot of information. So being kept informed with each other and the world and what's going on is very important. And then the deaf community is very tight-knit and close because of that discrimination and oppression they have faced. So when they're tight-knit, they develop long-term relationships with each other, but they also feel this sense of duty to the group to keep each other informed, and to make sure that everybody is okay. Okay, last one. Other than the word deaf, a culturally appropriate way to identify people would be to say they are none of the above. Okay, deaf and dumb, deaf and mute are old terms that people used to use because they thought deaf people, if you can't hear, then you can't speak, or that you can't learn. Hearing impaired is, we talked about this before, not appropriate because it implies that they're broken and focuses on their hearing loss and not the person as a whole. Now, hard of hearing. Hard of hearing is not a culturally appropriate term. If you're just going to ask, are you deaf? They'll tell you yes or no, okay? Or some deaf people, depending on how they feel with American Sign Language, their own identity, how they feel within the community, they might label themselves as hard of hearing. Then you can say, oh, Bob is hard of hearing. But unless they tell you personally that they are hard of hearing, they're deaf. That is it. Okay?